have pencils or a spoon and a pot, you can follow along with us.
We're going to sing, Jesus Loves the Little Children.
It is now time to sing the books of the Bible. How many books are in the whole Bible?
66.
And how many are in the Old Testament?
39.
And how many are in the New Testament?
27.
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1st and 2nd Samuel, 1st Kings, 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Chronicles, Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther, Job, Psalms, Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentations, Ezekiel, Daniel, Hosea, Joel, Amos, Obadiah, Jonah, Micah, Nahum, Habakkuk, Zephaniah, Haggai, Zechariah, and the last one, Malachi. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Acts, and the letter to the Romans, 1st and 2nd Corinthians, Galatians, and Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, 1st and 2nd Thessalonians, 1st and 2nd Timothy, Titus, and Philemon, Hebrews, and the book of James, 1st and 2nd Peter, 1st and 2nd, 3rd John, Jude, and Revelation.
I want to thank you for singing the books of the Bible with us, and I want to encourage you to keep practicing those every Sabbath. At my Sabbath school, we sing it every week because then it gets ingrained in our hearts. And I'm sure there are some of you at home who can sing the books of the Bible already. If you think you can sing the books of the Bible, why don't you take a video of yourselves and we'll put it in our video. You can email it to friendsandpraise@gmail.com. We'd also like to encourage you at this time to go get your Sabbath school offering. There are a couple of ways that you can give during this time. You can go with your parents to AdventistGiving.org, or you can make yourself a little bank like we have here. It was just a jar, and then we printed off the printable at AdventistMission.org. We want to encourage you to keep giving your Sabbath school offerings so that we can help our friends over in the Trans-European Division.
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you that we still have church. Thank you that we can all gather and still learn about you. Please be with all those who have coronavirus, but please help it to die down a little so we can still we'll see our loved ones and friends. In Jesus' name, amen.
Good morning. Welcome back to Nature Story Time. Well, today we're going to be talking about a sweet little baby cow that's also called a calf. Well, have you guys ever lived on a farm, or maybe you visited a farm before? A farm can be a really fun place to go to, can it, with all the little baby animals and lots of things to see. Well, if you've ever been to a farm, then you probably have noticed some baby calves not long after they were born. Have you ever noticed how small and helpless they look? A newborn calf can stand up soon after it is born, but it is still quite weak and wobbly, isn't it? For the first few days of its life, it is not able to keep up with the rest of the herd, so its mother may leave it hidden in a safe spot. And several times during the day, she will return to her calf to give it milk. That sounds kind of silly to us, doesn't it? We wouldn't want our mommies to hide us in the grass or somewhere when we're babies, would we? That seems kind of silly, but that's how cows do it. And this mommy cow is being a really good mommy cow to make sure that her babies are well fed and safe. The milk that she gives her baby is very important. When a calf is born, it doesn't have the protection from disease called antibodies that the older cows do. For a while, it gets that protection from its mother's milk. Isn't that wonderful how Jesus has made everything that we ever need to keep us safe? Even after a calf can protect itself from diseases, it will still drink its mother's milk for a while. A baby cow may start tasting a bit of grass when it is only a few days old, but it keeps drinking its mother's milk until it is about 8 or 9 months old. That's the best food for a calf when it's young. So how well can a young calf take care of itself? Not very well at all, can it? It needs a lot of help from its mother during the first few months of its life. Just like when we're babies, we can't do hardly anything for ourselves either. Well, baby cows are pretty much the same way. Well, what if we needed help with something and you went to a young calf and asked it to help you? Would it be able to help you? No, certainly not. Well, then what if you carved a calf out of gold and asked it to help you? Could it help? No, that's even more silly, isn't it? That's like asking this little plastic toy cow for help when we're in trouble. It's not even alive. It can't hear us. It can't even moo to us or anything. It's just a toy, so it's silly to ask it for help. At least a real calf can see and hear and walk. But a gold calf can't do any of these things, can it? And yet some people still make idols like that and bow down to them and ask for help. That is so foolish, isn't it? The Bible says, eyes they have, but they do not see. They have ears, but they do not hear. Feet they have, but they do not walk. That's found in Psalm 115, verses 5 through 7. We should always worship the God in heaven, shouldn't we? He answers us when we pray to him, and he is always able to help us when we need it. So this week, let's remember to ask Jesus for help and to pray to Jesus, because he is the only one that can really hear us and answer our prayers. Well, I will see you back here next week. I hope you all have a wonderful Sabbath day. Bye-bye.
Hey guys, I'm Caleb Wolf from the SDA Church and Belleville SDA Church, and I'll be singing Jesus Loves You today.
Good morning and happy Sabbath, boys and girls. I hope that you are having a wonderful day. As you can see here, we have a campground set up, and What is one of the most fun things to do when camping? I think it's sitting around the campfire together. And of course, if you're sitting around the campfire, besides from making s'mores, campfire stories, that's one of the most fun things that you can do. And of course, if we're going to tell a campfire story, especially on Sabbath, let's make them Bible stories because there are so many great Bible stories. In fact, the Sabbath school lesson for this week is a really exciting story that I want to share with you. So let's come on and let's have a look at what we're going to be talking about. First, before we get started, we want to go over the memory verse. I hope some of you have lessons and have studied them and memorized your Bible verse. And if not, that's okay. We'll do it together. It is found in Proverbs 29, verse 25. Proverbs 29:25. It says, "The fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe." And a snare means a trap. So our fears and our worries from Satan are a trap to us, but if we trust in God, we will be safe. One more time, the fear of man brings a snare, but those who trust in the Lord will be safe. Again, Proverbs 29:25. As I said today, we have a story for you that comes from your lesson, and this is about King Hezekiah of Judea. We know that there was the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah. Most all of the Israelite kings had been evil from the beginning on, and because of that, God had let the Assyrians come down and capture them and take them away as captives. He had let them go through many difficult times because of this. Many of the kings in Judah had been evil, but there were some that tried to follow God. In fact, last week, you learned about Joash, a king that had started off good, but then had become evil. Now, King Hezekiah had something going for him that was very important. He had a mother, Abijah, who loved the Lord with all of her heart, and she was determined that even though her husband was wicked, the king who was her husband was wicked, that she would raise Hezekiah to love the Lord with all of his heart. And she did a good job because King Hezekiah, we are told, followed God his entire life. Unlike most any king, he kept his heart pure for God from the time he was little till the very end of his life. Now, that's not to say he didn't make some mistakes, and we will talk about that later, but he always had a heart that came back to God and sought God above all else. Now, let's get back to the beginning of the story. King Hezekiah was king in Judah. And as we said, the Assyrians had been causing trouble for Judah. And finally, the Assyrians decided to come and surround the city. They wanted them to give up, to become their slaves, to pay them tribute. And King Hezekiah said, "We will trust the Lord." In fact, before all of this, he had done much to help the people prepare for this. When he became king, he got rid of all the idols, and he told people they were going to worship again in the temple. In fact, he got the priest that in 2 weeks he had that temple cleaned out, something they thought might take months or maybe even years. Because the people were so on fire from the Lord, from Hezekiah's charge, in 2 weeks they had the temple cleared out and services were beginning again. He had people bringing in tithes and offerings. He invited Israel to come and begin Passover feasting again in Jerusalem with them. And most Israelites sadly refused. They didn't want anything to do with coming and worshiping with the Jews in Judea. And unfortunately, as we said, God allowed the Assyrians to take many of them captives as a result. But King Hezekiah had gotten the people in his area to reform. And because of this, they were following God when the Assyrians arrived more than the others had. And they were not as afraid. Now, of course, they were afraid because an army was around them, but they were trusting in God. And especially with their king's example, they were not as afraid as the other nations. King Hezekiah had sent people to talk with the Assyrians, and they said that you had better give up or things will go much worse for you. They even lied and mocked about God. They said, "God told us to come attack you." Well, Hezekiah talked to Isaiah, and Isaiah encouraged them. Isaiah the prophet encouraged them to trust in the Lord and all would be well, and that they would have the victory. And when a letter came from the Assyrians pressing them further to give up and telling them all the terrible things that were coming, Hezekiah went to the temple and he laid the letter before the Lord. And he prayed and he cried out to God and he promised that he would trust God. And God did deliver them. In fact, they didn't even have to fight, for an angel went through the camp of the Assyrians at night and slew so many of the soldiers that when some of the Assyrians woke up the next morning, they were terrified. How did this happen? And they packed up and simply left. Hezekiah and the people were victorious by simply following what God had asked them to do. Now, they were so excited about all these changes that people went down and they removed all the final altars and the Asherah poles. And in fact, they even had, King Hezekiah had to break down the serpent that Moses had put on a pole in the wilderness. They still had that. And he had to break that apart because people had begun to worship it like an idol. But now a lot of spiritual revival had come to the people. And they swept those things away. And as the years went by, Hezekiah was keeping true to God and leading the people closer back to them. And as he was getting older, one day something bad happened to him. Somehow he got a boil, a very painful, swollen sore on his body. And this one was so severe, we are told, that it appeared that he might die. And Isaiah was sent to tell him to get his affairs in order, to get his household all together, and to take care of everything because he would die. Now, when Hezekiah was given this message, he couldn't believe it. He was so sad. He turned his face to the wall and he cried out to God. He said, I've followed you. I've walked in your ways. Please heal me. Please restore me. Please don't have me die. Don't allow me to die. And as Isaiah the prophet was leaving the temple, he stopped because God had a new message for him. He said, go back in now to Hezekiah and deliver this message. I have decided to add 15 more years to your life. In 3 days you will be well and you will be praising me in the temple. So Isaiah, I'm sure he was very happy to deliver this message, ran back to the king and told Hezekiah the message. Hezekiah could hardly believe it. 15 more years and he would be well and praising God in just 3 days. He was so sick he could hardly believe it. He had hope and he wanted a sign from God that this would be true. And Isaiah said, okay, God will grant you a sign. You have two choices. Would you rather the sun move forward 10 paces or move backward? Hezekiah thought, well, the sun goes forward on the sundial every day, so that doesn't seem as amazing and miraculous and impossible as God making the sun move backward. He said, that's the sign I want. Can you please ask God to have the sun move backward 10 paces? And God did so, and they said that there were stairs there, and Hezekiah could see the sun moving backward, back up those stairs, backward 10 spaces. It seems like an impossible thing to do. But God is the God of the impossible. And in fact, I'm going to go here, and I have an illustration for you. I have a blank piece of paper. Looks like nothing special. It wouldn't seem possible that there is a message on this blank piece of paper, does it? Well, let's see. I'm going to hold this over the fire very carefully, and children, if you try something like this at home, please have an adult assist you with it. And I'm going to see if a message will appear with the heat. So we can see things are beginning to show, but it does take a little while and it's very hot. So I'm going to go back. I've prepared one earlier, and here it is. What seemed impossible, a blank piece of paper, had a message on it. And it says, with man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Matthew 19:26. Just as Hezekiah had asked for a sign that seemed impossible. It seemed impossible. The sun going backward, the earth moving backwards for time to go backward seemed impossible. But God can make things possible. To take a man who was at the brink of death and heal him and have him praising God in the temple in 3 days seems impossible, but not with God. And if you want to do this at home, simply take a sheet of paper, take some lemon juice and a paintbrush or a toothpick, and you can write out a Bible message or verse, or you can draw a nice Sabbath picture, let it dry, And then you can put it over heat, maybe a candle or over a campfire or some sort of heat source. So please, children, make sure that you have an adult to help you with this so that you don't get burned. All right, only do this with adult supervision. And then the invisible message will become visible. All right, we're going to go back to King Hezekiah now. The impossible had happened. In 3 days, he was well, and he was praising God in the temple. And it wasn't soon after that he had some visitors. Why? Because far away in Babylon, they had seen something strange happen. They had seen the sundial go back 10 paces. And they heard that it was because of a king in Judea, in the land of Judah, that this had happened. And they wanted to know why. Why had this happened? What kind of God could have performed this miracle? And so King Hezekiah welcomed these Babylonian visitors. And this was his chance to show his greatest treasure of all, which is God, a relationship with God, the God of gods, the true God, the only God. This was Hezekiah's chance to be a witness and a missionary to the foreign lands, how God had wanted his people, the Israelites, to be all along, a witness to others. But this is where Hezekiah made the mistake. Remember earlier I said Hezekiah followed God his whole life. But he did make a mistake. And instead of showing the men about God, he focused more on his treasures. He showed them his armory, all the weapons that he had prepared, the shields and the swords. He focused on showing them all the expensive oils that he had and perfumes. He showed them all of his expensive spices. Back then, some spices were worth more than gold. And he focused on showing them all the treasures of his kingdom, the gold and the silver, and all of the precious stones that he had accumulated, that God had blessed him with. He knew that foreign kings were impressed with wealth, with power, with things. And that's what he focused on showing them. He was bragging and showing off, instead of showing off the true treasure of Israel, which was God and a relationship with him. Boys and girls, I hope we don't miss opportunities to share Jesus with others. He is the true source of all wisdom and might and power and glory. And as we study on next week, I'm sure you will find some more exciting stories, but Hezekiah is a wonderful story of how God can work in a heart that is totally dedicated to him and a people who are totally dedicated to him. And so I pray that this following week you will follow God as King Hezekiah did with your whole heart. And when you make a mistake, ask God to forgive you, and he will. And he will do seemingly impossible things in your life when you choose to witness for him in your family, in your school, and in your community. And right now, I know all of us are home, so be a witness in your home. All right. Thank you and have a happy Sabbath day. Goodbye.
We also have a memory verse song that goes along with our lesson this week, and it's from Proverbs 29:25. I'm going to sing it through the first time, and the second time I'd love it if you'd join in singing with me. The fear of man brings a snare. The fear of man brings a snare. But whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. Proverbs 29:25. The fear of man brings a snare. The fear of man brings a snare. But whoever trusts in the Lord shall be safe. Proverbs 29:25.
Hi, my name is Samantha, and this is my brother, Hayden, and our mission today is planting potatoes. This is my dog, Bailey, and Moose. You're probably wondering, what do planting potatoes have to do with dogs? Well, our dogs eat a lot, and we use them to plant potatoes. Well, the first step in planting potatoes,
Or you could use a cat bag if you don't have dogs, or if you don't have pets, you can use a 1-gallon bucket.
well, the first step to planting potatoes is making a smooth top. So all you do is roll the top to make it smooth. The second step is putting holes in it to help with the drainage. After that process is done, then you're gonna Then you're gonna want to fill your bag with dirt. And after it's done, after you got that, then you're gonna wanna find potatoes, whether it's at your house or at a food market. After you get potatoes, then you're gonna want to plant the ones that have little sprouts. See those little sprouts on there? Otherwise they won't grow as well. If it doesn't, it's okay, you can leave them out and it should start growing sprouts. And then you can plant them. So after you got a potato with some sprouts on it, all you do is stick it in the dirt and gently bury it until it's all the way covered. And there, you have your potato. So after a little while, then they will grow and then you'll have potatoes. Probably a couple months until they grow. And what that has to do with the mission story is that you can take them to friends that are hungry, elderly people that need potatoes, and maybe a neighbor that you don't even know.